Hey, welcome back to Ken versus the Stove. Today we're going to make bread using banana flour. Now, if you look up banana flour online, Wikipedia and all that, it'll tell you that in places where wheat flour is too expensive, they made flour out of bananas. The peasants, the poor people, made flour out of bananas. Which of course means that in the United States, if you want to buy this stuff, you better be prepared to pay an arm and a leg. The first one I bought was like this. It's not even, a couple cups, right? And then I bought another one, and this is way too expensive, in all honesty. Now, and this one, it comes from Togo, and we support a female Togo cooperative. Wonderful. It still sounds like an excuse to charge me more money. And this one comes from somewhere in South America, I think. You can make, I looked it up, banana flour is not hard to make. It can be time consuming. You take, you peel them, you cut them, you slice them into thin slices, you dehydrate them, and then you either mortar and pestle it or put it in your food processor or whatever. It's not that hard to make, but again, time consuming because you're going to have to wait several days for it to dehydrate. But I'd already bought the expensive stuff on Amazon, so we're going to try using that. Obviously, we're going to start out the way we always start out. We've got to make the little base with the yeast and that stuff in it. So let me get what I'm going to use for fluids. Buttermilk. Why do I have buttermilk instead of just regular milk, which I normally use? Well, I have buttermilk because I planned on making Coca-Cola Coca-Cola cake last week. This is an element, and I did not make it. I'm going to make it maybe this week, I promise. So let's warm up the buttermilk. So I'm going to warm the buttermilk to about 110 degrees. This will take a little bit. It'll take more than a little bit because apparently I have my fridge too cold and it froze the doggone buttermilk. So, wow. I've got another gallon in there. Let's see if the other gallon froze. Ah! The unopened gallon did not freeze. So, we will open this gallon. 2 cups, of course. Actually, we're going to go with 2.5. Well, yeah. I think 2.5 is actually the more appropriate amount. So, 2.5 cups of buttermilk. Ta-da! What? Now let me put both my opened buttermilk gallons in the fridge and turn the fridge up a little bit so that it doesn't freeze them both. Yeesh. Alright, that's pretty much it. So off we turn it, get it off that burner. Medium bowl. Okay. Alright, medium bowl. Three-quarters cup of honey. Yes, I am again using honey rather than using sugar since I don't like the sugar flavor. I think it gets too much. And now we put in active dry yeast. Kroger version, not Fleischmann's. I actually have on order some Turkish active dry yeast. I'll be interested to see how that turns out. And if it has an easier opening than this stupid thing does. And now we let that sit for 10 or 15 minutes to see, to let the yeast rise and all. I'll be back in 15. Hey, welcome back. Well, it has somewhat, kind of crusted, but it also did the bubbling thing. So I'm going to assume that that's yeasted enough. It worked well when I made my wheat bread last weekend, so I'm going to assume this is pretty good, and we'll move from here. Next step, let's see. 1 teaspoon of salt, or 1 tablespoon of salt. Ready. Good, melted. No, I don't do the mix it back and forth from eggshell to eggshell thing. I just dump it in and I pick up the doggone egg yolk. And dump it in. Pour them in there. Okay. Yeah, I think it's going to do okay. Now let's try the whisking. Oh, no, I know what I need that I haven't put in there yet. The old half stick of butter. I should have had this out solidifying. Now I'm going to have to nuke it. Daggone it. While that's going on, let's mix a little bit of the salt and the eggs in. My good old beat up thing. Let's get the butter out. Well, it worked out pretty well. Whisk some more. Hey, whisked enough, I think. Now we start adding the flour in. Tonomi banana flour. This is the stuff I bought at first, thinking I was going to get a lot more than I really did. As you do this, it is smelling more and more banana-ish. So at 1 pound, it looks like this, right? It's glop. It's not quite where I like my bread dough to be. So I'm going to have to open the second thing of banana flour and add some more. Alright, so we got the big bowl. Gotta knead the dough for a few minutes. Okay, before we stick it in the big pan to ferment, rise, whatever you want to call it, you gotta knead it. I'm gonna knead for 10 minutes. Uh-oh, something's going on. Hold on. Alright, so the evil deer have run up the hill, so good old Pedro is, past that point. Kneading for 10 minutes. Hey Siri, set alarm 10 minutes. Okay, it's on. I don't take it out of the bowl. I just need it here. I don't know why everybody goes, okay, you got to put it on this board. You put flour on the board or vegetable oil or whatever. Why don't you just need it in the bowl of tin? Huh? Now, I do see where there's these people who do the fancy, I fold it like this and make it work perfectly without doing all the kneading and all that sort of stuff. Those are also the people that don't get it to stick to their hands. Somehow, you absolutely can knead bread without getting it without it sticking to their hands at all. I hate those people. Actually, I'm impressed. But, you can find that all over YouTube, right? I gotta tell you, this stuff is a lot stickier than wheat dough that I've dealt with before. I'm trying to get it off my hands washing. It took quite a bit to get it. I'm gonna make sure I've got a little bit of water here to keep my hands from being all that sticky when I try to get it out of this bowl and put it into the main bowl for rising. Okay, here's what it looks like in there, right? I'm gonna pat it down some. Okay, so I'm gonna cover this now and do a cold ferment, which means it will go in the fridge for the next, probably next 14 to 16 hours, depending on when I get home from work tomorrow. Cold ferments are supposed to cause more, it slows down the fermentation process and it causes more flavor to come out and all, et cetera, et cetera. What I like cold ferments for is I can work on this tonight and then come back tomorrow and finish it. So it makes it a lot more convenient. So that's it. I'll see y'all tomorrow, and I'm off to put this in the fridge. Okay, so I've got it out of the fridge now, and it was in there for 14, 16 hours, something like that. Like I say, if nothing else, cold fermenting lets you put it in the fridge, bring it back out the next day when you've got time to deal with it again, right? So you can do all the prep work one night, and the next night you get to work on it again. And it works out pretty well that way. So what I've got going here, generally you leave it out for an hour, hour and a half, time for it to get warm and actually rise and everything. If it's cold, like last weekend when I made some wheat bread, I had to actually turn the stove on warm and leave it up here on the top so that it could start rising. This week, when it's not cold, when I think we're pretty close to 90 degrees right now, and I don't use air conditioning in the house very often, so maybe 80 in the house. This should do okay on its own. And we'll wait an hour, maybe an hour and a half to see how well it rises, and then we'll move on to the next step. See you then. Okay, so I actually waited about 2 hours. It was taking longer to rise than I thought it would. And it rose, although it's weird, it's kind of like darker crusted on top, but it did rise. So now we punch it down and then knead it for another, I don't know, 5 minutes. And then we put it in its separate containers. So let's get the containers ready first. Hoppa! Bread containers. Or bread formers, what are we going to call them? The ever-present, never necessary parchment paper. Okay, let me get something to bunch this down with other than just my hands. Okay, so I'm breaking Mega Bowl out for this. Works pretty well. Ham on it so it doesn't stick. And let's start flattening. Okay, it appears to be flattened. You can see that right there. It's flattened. Again, I'm going to knead it in this bowl. I don't understand why everybody's like, take it out, put it on this, and do that. You know, you can just do it in a bowl. I mean, all you're doing is sticking your hands in and going, here, knead. Hey Siri, set alarm 5 minutes.
I've set your alarm for 17:50.
Thank you. Okay, I don't fold it up. You see people doing a lot of times. They'll fold it up and make it in a neat little shape. I just put it in and I pat down the top, and it seems to work pretty well. At least it has for me so far. Okay, so what we got now are 2 bread pans filled with, well, one filled and one kind of filled with the dough. I suspect I'm going to have one that's going to turn out bigger than the other. That'll be interesting to see how that bakes up. So now what we do is wet cloth over top of them. All right, wet cloth. Let's put it over them. Another 2 hours, maybe longer. We'll see. Hey Siri, set alarm for 2 hours.
Your alarm is set for 19:57.
Okay, so it has had time. Oh wait, I've got it over here. Time to rise. It's risen enough. Interesting. You know, they all the things where you see people baking online, they're like, well, let it rise up over the rim. No, I don't want it to rise up over the rim. That's just asking for a mess. Okay, so now the next thing I need to do, the oven has been heated to 350, right? Here's the one that's got more in it. It has risen. It's about doubled. Now I need to score it. And for those of you who don't know what scoring means, that means you cut the top so that, well, you cut the top so that it won't burst, right? And anybody who watched my very first bread making video saw that I had one that burst. So let's do a little bit of cutting. Wow, this is still sticky stuff. It does not want to cut right. Okay. Okay, so it's all got cut across. Now let's put it in the oven for 30 minutes. The oven's been preheated to 350 degrees. 30 minutes is the usual time. Let's see what we get. Woo! That heat. In. 1. In. 2. And close. Now we wait. We see what we get in 30 minutes. Okay, we're back. It's been a half an hour. You know, it smells pretty much like normal bread. It's not quite that wheat smell, but it does smell pretty good. All right, let me get something so I can get it out without burning my hands off. That is an interesting look. See that? Not quite, doesn't look quite the same. And the smaller one turned out the same kind of way, right? Interesting. Hey, now I gotta find something to put them on to dry them out. I don't have a drying rack. What I do have are paper plates, which seem to work pretty doggone well. Ta-da! God, I love this parchment paper. Ooh, so burnt on the bottom. Now the one I had, I actually put this on the lower rack. It's a little bit burnt down there on the bottom. I don't know if you can see that. Not thrilled by that. This one, on the other hand, the larger one, which I put on the upper rack, not so much. Looks fine, right? A little bit of burnt stuff on the outside. Now we just let it dry, or let it cool. That'll probably take, what, 12 hours? I don't know, 4 hours or so, and we'll see. We'll see what we got. Okay, it's a few hours later. The bread the banana flour bread has had time to cool. Wow. Comparatively, you can see that's pretty doggone flat. Like, here's the white bread I made about a week ago. It is a lot. Yeah. It rose a lot more. And so you don't think that was a fluke. Here's the wheat bread I made last Sunday, I think it was. It is higher. It's not quite as, didn't rise quite as much as the white bread, but it's good. Let's cut it open and see what it looks like. Well, on the inside, it looks, you know, basically decent crumbing, you know, crumbs. Let's try the taste. One basic piece of bread, basic piece of banana flour bread. Strange taste. The texture is like other breads, but when you get past the texture, kind of a bitter aftertaste. Let me compare here. Get a little bit of the wheat bread, a little bit of the white bread. White bread. Tastes like white bread because I made it with milk and eggs. It tastes a little bit richer, I think, than what we generally get at the store, but Try the wheat bread. Pretty good wheat bread. You don't want any of this, cat. Well, it was a good experiment, but it's not as good as the whiter wheat bread. I'll do a further overview tomorrow. I'll see you then. Okay, so the banana flour bread didn't turn out very well. It rose, it just not as well as the white and the wheat has. I will say that white flour has risen the best for me. Wheat flour has risen fairly well. This banana flour did not rise well. It rose. I mean, when it was in the bowl, it filled more of the bowl. When it was, in the pan, it did rise in the pan some, and it rose some when it was being baked, but not nearly as much as what I was used to with other bread. I mean, you saw it, it kind of looked like a brick. Now, when I cut it open, it had crumb consistency and everything. It could have very well been used as sandwich bread, right? Cut it and, stick something in between it, you'd be just fine. I could see why this is if you didn't have actual wheat, you could replace it with banana flour, and this would serve fine for most purposes of a bread. It didn't taste as good. Now, I'll say this, now it's made, when you make it, as I've told you before, you slice up a bunch of bananas, you dry it, dehydrate them, and then you just make them into powder. You crush them down into powder, right? Now, you're supposed to use very, very, very green bananas. And I will say, by the time it got to the end, now while you're kneading it and doing all this other stuff, yeah, you can smell a banana smell. But when it's done baking, you don't smell any banana smell. It doesn't smell like wheat bread, but you just don't smell a banana smell. And when you taste it, you don't taste a banana smell. As a matter of fact, banana taste. As a matter of fact, it actually tasted bitter, which was kind of a surprise to me. When I chomped into it, first couple bites is fine. It was a thicker, heavier bread than what I've gotten out of wheat, except of course when I've had the odd occasion where it just flattened out on me, where the yeast didn't work. But in general, it was a thicker, heavier, consistency in the crumb and everything than wheat. Actually, I think it probably would have made a really good sandwich bread. But you get like two chomps into it, and you're on your second chew, and then you start getting this bitter flavor, right? And this bitter flavor comes, and you swallow it, and the bitter flavor stays for a little bit. It just wasn't worth it, Matter of fact, the 2 loaves I made ended up over the fence into the cow pasture out back. They're gone. I did it at night. Who knows? The cows might have gotten it. The deer might have gotten it. However, but it's gone. Apparently, they didn't have a problem with it. And I will say, if I was stuck, now I didn't have any wheat flour, and I needed something for bread, this would be passable. Not good, but passable. So I don't recommend it to you. Now, next time, the next one is going to be bread made with yeast from a yeast I've had that's imported from Turkey. That should be interesting. There's always people that talk about how you develop an intolerance to what comes off of the bread yeast, right? You develop that intolerance. However, I've also seen things on the internet, because we always have to believe what's on the internet, that say that's only with the yeasts that are used in the United States, which have been here for centuries, since they were first brought over with the first Europeans, and that if we use some that are still over in Europe, we don't have those problems. I'm dubious. You should be too, but I'm going to try it. So next time I bake up some bread, which is going to be a little bit, I've still got like a loaf and a half of wheat and a half loaf of white left. But when I do next, I'm going to try that Turkish yeast, and we'll see how it turns out. So until then, go out and bake something, folks. Have some fun in the kitchen. actually a little bit of a blast. Masalama, y'all.